Hi, everyone, and good evening. Welcome to day 53. Of course, before we get rolling tonight, the t-shirt. After this weekend's happy, blissful run through my color scheduling system, I was feeling kind of computer geeky today, and I wore a computer geeky shirt. It is, of course, the 5 stages of debugging: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I have a picture of it here so I can actually see what it is. But the descriptions for each stage are things that programmers tend to say. But it was just the mood I was in. Anyway, today ended up becoming a really interesting contrast between Be Prepared and Brighter. Because this morning's Be Prepared session was very construction heavy, very physically expensive. Brighter this afternoon felt softer and more exploratory. So each session in its own way clarified a little more things that I'm always circling around, but I'm getting closer. And each day helps me get closer, because that continuity line, that energy line, increasingly feels less like one more thing I have to manually manage, and more like the main power line entering into a house. See, once a power line exists, the rest of the systems inside just basically tap onto it and pull the energy they need to do their job. Weirdly enough, I think that thought today changed how I was thinking about stuff, because now it was a question of let that energy be there and everything else will survive off of it. So this morning during Be Prepared, the continuity line still felt physically expensive to maintain. Why? Because I was physically holding myself to maintain that energy. I was literally locking my posture, my torso, my breath, and I even had my arms squeezing against the top of my torso, trying to basically say, if I don't move, I can control the energy. By the end of the session, of course, I was beaten to all hell. Now, not emotionally frustrated or discouraged, just physically wrung out, because I was bearing down on a lot of muscles all at once for quite some time. But at the same time, something else is changing as well. Even when the octave transition gets unstable now, the surrounding performance no longer completely falls apart around it. I commented a few weeks ago, if a section destabilized, it usually felt like, well, now I have to find some way to get my way home again. Now it increasingly feels more like there are unstable sections inside a larger structure that is still standing, and it stays standing. And a lot of today started pulling me back toward this same lesson that has been going on. Harder you force, the worse everything behaves. But when the structure underneath everything aligns correctly, the voice does seem to organize itself. One of the strangest things this morning was that the octave wasn't even the thing teaching me this lesson. It was the words I was using to think about the octave. I have been using, in several episodes, the octave jump, sometimes the octave hop. And after one take, I realized that I was basically psychologically setting up the wrong mentality, because hop and jump mean launching or attacking or leaving the stable ground, and of course, hoping you survive what you're jumping for. And I think my brain subconsciously added that to the other subconscious things that hold me back. So I wanted to change the term I was using for that transition. So here we go. Let's see if we survive this. No, the more I worked this morning, the more I started thinking, no, this really needs to become change octaves, or the octave change. I change an octave and then I change back the octave. No big deal. And by changing octave, it is, if I sit at a C3 and I go, I need to change octaves and drop to a B3, no problem. So if I'm sitting at a C3 and I need to go to a C4, which I'm not doing right now, it should be the same mentality. Going from here down should not be any more scary than going from here up. At least that's the mentality I want to keep, so that I'm not fearing or putting unnecessary extra work into what I'm trying to do. Once the whole thing stopped emotionally behaving like a cliff edge, everything started to open up more naturally. And while it still was a good amount of reach, a good amount of throwing the spike up onto the roof, hoping that it'll catch something, it still was a broader target. And I'm really optimistic that in the coming week or so, I will get far closer on that. And if I get this octave change, hopefully that will drive Boulevard and its being initially in the higher octave. Okay, Brighter this afternoon was great because the whole emotional mindset of that session changed. Yesterday's Brighter work felt, not yesterday, here's how many days I do this. The last session for Brighter was taking the engine apart on the garage floor, trying to figure out how the pieces fit together. So there I am. I'm trying consciously to inspect and analyze every moving piece individually. Today, however, felt much lighter, much more into looking around and exploring. And instead of trying to consciously keep an eye on every system all at once, I mostly wanted to see, does that continuity line keep going if I stop overmanaging it? And, no surprise, it does. Not perfectly, not consistently, but enough that the whole thing started feeling different intentionally and internally. So the earlier sessions often felt like theatricality was fighting the tone was fighting the support was fighting the continuity fighting timing and entrances and phrasing, and everybody's fighting at everything else. It was basically one of those old box games about a war. And that's not going to help me get anywhere. But by not holding on to things, it increasingly feels more like several partially developed systems are basically trying to learn how to live in the same house together. So we have stepped from war to an MTV reality show. Hopefully we'll get a little better than that as well. I will say that coexistence, better than war. But obviously I'm looking for basically a hippie commune. So everything's just loving everything else. So somewhere during all of this, the continuity line suddenly became a lot clearer. I really stopped thinking about it as one more thing I have to maintain, and instead it felt foundational, like under everything else. And like the example of the power line going through a house, once you have that energy line, everything rides on it with its assistance. So phrasing, interpretation, theatricality, all the changes, and of course my favorite, vocal color, can all ride on that. And thinking that through, that changed the afternoon. Something happened, however, I wasn't planning on today. For Brighter, I have been doing verse 1A. And today I decided to just touch verse 1B. So 1A is sung, there's a little bit of speaking, then the rest of that verse, which goes right into the first chorus. And I just wanted to touch it to feel what it felt like when I was actually trying to do it. Which is strange, being as though it's something I've sung casually now for 6 months as an addict because of has-been. This was not... Okay, we're going to master a new section. This was Let's Poke the Bear. No. Let's poke at the new unexplored terrain before I get tired and see what happens. Am I able to walk across it? Do I find quicksand? Who knows? Almost immediately it became very obvious that 1B is very different from 1A. So when you first start singing the verse, the emotional runway is much longer. When you hit the last part of that verse, you hit it hard and you hit it quick. The entrance is much faster. It's all built around the idea that you pretty much have a fast-moving, passionate line or set of lines that really have to ride on one breath. One note about the one breath thing. Most of the music from Has-Been is written to not allow for breathing. And that may sound strange for any kind of music, but they knew they would be recording it strictly in the booth, strictly in parts, so the breathing was before you would take on a chunk. This is why if you've seen Has-Been Hotel on Broadway, it's really quite amazing to watch the same voice actors really trying to negotiate where to breathe in a song that wasn't really designed for it. Okay, so like I said, really quick drop, right in, fast speed. The first pass, I pretty much could just call it a scratch. I'd call it terrain mapping, but I almost missed the map entirely. I was late. I missed like half the first line and just picked it up as I could. So the question, how do you get prepared for that entrance? How do you get prepared for where it's going and how fast it's going? How do you manage one breath? What else? It really was like some really creative analogy that I'm actually just not finding at the moment. But after only a couple of playing with it takes, it started to feel less alien. I'm used to singing it straight through in a casual sense, but here I'm actually taking a chunk. And after a few, I kind of combine the rhythm of doing it casually with combined with the process of actually controlled singing it. Now, I didn't solve it. It didn't make it stable. It's definitely not comfortable, but it's understandable. And that's one of the better things that's going on. I have moved from catastrophe to explorable, or fear to curiosity. And that's really different from I just need to survive that one section. And I think that's still going on in Boulevard. So this instead feels more like there is the underlying structure beginning to hold together, and underneath several different kinds of terrain. We've got the slower entry on 1A, we've got the faster entry on 1B. So there is that line forming. It's not efficient yet. It's definitely not coming on its own. It's not automatic. But since discovering it, it is definitely real. I will be, as I move forward in Brighter, be doing more analysis on that. So there will be another deep spoiler episode coming soon. As I also mentioned, before I forget, I am away for the first time, at least in these 60 days, on a personal retreat for the weekend. I'm not sure as of yet how I'm going to be posting, but I am going to do my best. I may try to have a couple of preparatory episodes that I work on over the next day or two. That's it for today. As always, thank you. I really tried to get to some of your comments yesterday, but unfortunately the entire creational project kind of ripped me to shreds yesterday, or the repair project, more to speak. But I'm definitely going to be looking at comments tonight. I love hearing some of the comments. I'm glad that I can represent the an older generation being into shows like Has Been. I was a theater kid. I mean, it's no different. But thank you for being here. Thank you for following along the journey. And tomorrow will be day 54, much like Studio 54, but without the drugs. So, until tomorrow, later.